What happens when a group of fake HOA cops tries to harass the wrong kid, only to discover his father is a high-ranking FBI agent? Stick around until the end of this shocking and twisted tale, because you won't believe how it all unfolds. And don't forget, if you love true justice stories that flip the script, smash that subscribe button right now so you never miss the next jaw-dropping story. It all began on a blistering Saturday afternoon in a quiet suburban neighborhood where the residents prided themselves on their manicured lawns, white picket fences, and the strict HOA rules that seemed to dictate everything from mailbox colors to the type of mulch you could lay in your front yard. But beneath the neat facade of conformity lay an undercurrent of control, prejudice, and entitlement that surfaced like a viper when a 17-year-old black teenager named Malik was spotted walking back from the community basketball court with a duffel bag slung over his shoulder, earbuds in his ears, and sweat dripping down his forehead, unaware that three men who had been masquerading around the neighborhood as self-proclaimed HOA enforcement officers were watching him with narrowed eyes, radios clipped to their belts, and a twisted sense of authority burning in their chests. They weren't real police, just homeowners who had pooled money into creating their own so-called neighborhood watch, complete with uniforms stitched to look like tactical gear and vehicles painted with decals that mimicked law enforcement insignias but stopped short of legality. Yet their entire identity hinged on the illusion of power, and when Malik crossed paths with them, they saw not a teenager but a target they could intimidate, a scapegoat to showcase their dominance. So they rolled up beside him, lights flashing on their SUV, and demanded he stop and put his bag on the ground, their tone dripping with aggression masked as official protocol. But Malik, startled, yanked his earbuds out and stammered that he lived there, pointing down the street, only for the men to scoff and accuse him of trespassing, stealing, and loitering, while neighbors peeked out from blinds, whispering, some recording on phones, none willing to intervene. The fake cops escalated, circling Malik, demanding ID, grabbing at his duffel, threatening to detain him until real authorities arrived. But Malik's hands shook as he tried to explain that his father was home, that he was a resident, that this wasn't right, yet his pleas only fueled their sense of superiority, until one of them shoved him against the SUV hood, sparking murmurs from the small crowd gathering, a spectacle brewing under the summer sun, and Malik's heart pounded with a mix of fear and humiliation, thinking for a moment that his life might spiral into another tragic headline, until a calm but commanding voice sliced through the chaos. "What exactly do you think you're doing with my son?" And the entire atmosphere shifted as a tall, broad-shouldered man in plain clothes walked briskly across the street, his stride deliberate, his eyes cold steel, his presence radiating authority without needing a badge displayed. But when he reached into his jacket and flashed the unmistakable golden credentials of the FBI, jaws dropped and the so-called HOA cops froze in disbelief, their facade crumbling instantly because standing before them was Special Agent Derek Johnson, a decorated federal agent who had spent decades dismantling criminal enterprises and exposing corruption, and who now looked ready to dismantle three overzealous wannabes who had just laid hands on his only child. The crowd hushed, phones raised higher, whispers turned into audible gasps as Derek stepped closer, towering over the ringleader, demanding their names. Demanding to know under what authority they had stopped Malik, and when they stammered about HOA enforcement and community safety. Derek's laugh was humorless, sharp like broken glass, because he knew exactly what kind of vigilante charade this was, the type of unlawful impersonation that straddled the line between misdemeanor and felony, and with a quiet menace in his voice, he reminded them that impersonating law enforcement carried federal consequences, obstruction of civil rights was prosecutable, and assaulting a minor was more than enough to ruin their lives. The men faltered, their bravado draining, but before they could slink away, Derek pulled out his phone, already dialing local PD, calmly instructing dispatch that he had three individuals in pseudo-police uniforms unlawfully detaining a minor, requesting immediate backup, and as sirens echoed faintly in the distance, the crowd grew bolder, neighbors shouting things like, "We knew they were taking this too far," and, "I told y'all they ain't real cops," while others who had once cheered the fake HOA patrol now tried to distance themselves from the mess, and Malik, shaken but safe, stood close to his father, whispering that he was okay but visibly trembling. His trust in the safety of his own neighborhood shattered in those few harrowing minutes, yet his father's protective hand on his shoulder grounded him as they waited for the real officers to arrive. But here's where the story twisted deeper, because when the squad cars finally pulled up, the HOA president herself, a woman named Mrs. Cartwright, known for her sharp tongue and iron grip over community rules, came storming out of her pristine colonial-style house, heels clicking against the pavement, shouting that her officers had done nothing wrong, that Malik had looked suspicious, that this was all a misunderstanding blown out of proportion, trying desperately to shield her crumbling empire of authority. But Derek, with patience born of years interrogating liars, let her rant until she accidentally admitted on camera that she had authorized the uniforms, the patrols, and the SUV decals, essentially confessing to orchestrating the entire scheme of impersonation. And when the police officers pieced together that this wasn't just overzealous neighbors but an organized attempt to mimic real law enforcement, their demeanor changed, their pens scribbled faster, and soon enough, Mrs. Cartwright and her officers were lined up, statements taken, warnings handed out that quickly escalated into arrests once Derek clarified federal statutes they had violated, because his word carried weight, his knowledge of the law airtight, leaving no room for escape. The neighbors watched, some horrified, some smugly satisfied that the HOA president finally met her downfall, and Malik, though shaken, began to realize that what had nearly been his worst nightmare was turning into a public reckoning for the abuse of power in his neighborhood, a dismantling of a toxic structure that had thrived unchecked for too long. Still, the story didn't end there, because when the case reached the local news, Derek found himself thrust into the spotlight, interviews requested, narratives spinning, and while he wanted nothing more than to shield Malik from the circus, he also recognized the importance of shining light on the issue, of using his platform to speak out against racial profiling, abuse of authority, and the dangers of communities allowing fake power structures to masquerade as law enforcement. So he agreed to one interview where he said, "Clear as day, what happened to my son could happen to any child, and if I wasn't there, the outcome could have been far worse. This isn't about rules or neighborhoods, it's about human dignity and the law, and no one is above that." Words that resonated far beyond the cul-de-sac, sparking conversations across town, even drawing federal interest in investigating similar HOA groups across the state, while Malik, in time, grew stronger from the ordeal, channeling his experience into activism at school, writing essays about justice, identity, and the courage of standing tall even when the world tries to box you in, supported every step of the way by a father who showed him that strength wasn't just in badges or guns but in truth, resilience, and refusing to bow to intimidation. And as for the fake HOA cops and their queen bee president, their empire collapsed like a house of cards, lawsuits followed, reputations ruined, jobs lost, families embarrassed, their dream of being neighborhood heroes replaced by the harsh reality of courtrooms and legal fees, a fitting end for those who had tried to play cops until they crossed paths with the wrong family, proving once again that karma doesn't knock politely, it kicks the door down when least expected.